The tractor rolled down Whitehall at 9:47 a.m., then another, then 50 more. Police tried blocking the route. Farmers kept coming. Westminster had seen protests before, angry crowds, clever signs, chanting activists who'd go home by evening. This was different. These weren't professional protesters. These were people who fed the nation, and they were done asking nicely. Leading them? A man nobody expected. Jeremy Clarkson, TV star, motoring journalist, celebrity millionaire, now standing on a flatbed truck with a microphone, facing 10,000 farmers, about to declare war on the prime minister. How did it come to this? October 2024, Rachel Reeves stood at the dispatch box announcing Labor's first budget. Inheritance tax on farms, agricultural land over 1 million pounds, taxed at 20%, closing a loophole, she claimed, making the wealthy pay their fair share. Keir Starmer nodded approvingly from the front bench. To them, it was simple economics. Rich landowners hiding wealth in farmland, avoiding taxes while public services crumbled. To farmers, it was a death sentence, because farmland isn't wealth you can spend, it's wealth you work. A family farm worth 3 million pounds on paper might generate 30,000 pounds profit a year. When the owner dies, the children inherit massive tax bills they can't pay without selling the land their families worked for generations. Sell the land, the farm dies. Keep the farm, go bankrupt paying the tax. Labor's response only affects the richest farmers. The farming community knew better. This would devastate family farms across Britain. But who would listen to them? Enter Jeremy Clarkson. November 2024. Clarkson had bought Diddley Squat Farm in the Cotswolds years earlier, started farming seriously, made a hit TV show about it. He wasn't playing farmer, he was one. And when the inheritance tax was announced, he did what politicians couldn't. He translated complex tax policy into language everyone understood. They're taxing tractors. They're taxing barns. They're taxing the land your grandfather's grandfather worked. And when you can't pay, they'll force you to sell to developers who will build houses nobody can afford. That clip went viral. Millions of views in hours. Suddenly, the farming crisis wasn't boring agricultural policy. It was a story people understood. Starmer's team tried dismissing Clarkson. Celebrity jumping on a cause, he'll get bored and move on. They badly miscalculated. Because Clarkson had something Starmer didn't: credibility with people who'd stopped trusting politicians. He spoke plainly. No spin, no careful wording, just direct communication. This government is killing British farming, and we're not going to let them. Within days, farmers started organizing. Not through traditional channels, through social media, WhatsApp groups, Clarkson's platforms. And the message was simple. London, November 19th. Bring your tractor. November 19th, 2024. The day Westminster realized this was serious. Farmers arrived from Scotland, Wales, Northern England, the Southwest, driving tractors, blocking roads, bringing British agriculture to a standstill. The media expected a few hundred protesters. Over 10,000 showed up. And standing at the front, speaking to the crowd, was Clarkson. His speech wasn't polished. It was raw, angry, real. They don't understand farming. They don't understand rural communities. They think a farm is just land rich people own. They're wrong. And today we're telling them, you will not destroy us, the crowd roared. Starmer watched from number 10, seeing something he hadn't faced before. Not angry activists he could ignore, not union leaders he could negotiate with, but ordinary people, farmers, rural workers, families, united behind someone who spoke their language. And that someone had 8 million social media followers and a TV show watched by millions. Labor's response was textbook political deflection. We understand concerns, we're listening, we'll review implementation, but the policy is necessary. Translation: we hear you, but we're doing it anyway. Clarkson translated that too. They're not listening. They're hoping you'll give up and go home. Will you? The crowd's answer: no. But Starmer had a problem. He couldn't attack Clarkson directly. Attack farmers, look cruel and out of touch. Attack Clarkson, make him more popular, and confirm Labor doesn't respect working people. So they tried a different strategy: undermine the protest's legitimacy. Labor MPs started briefing journalists. Many protesters aren't even farmers, it's astroturfing, rich landowners using genuine farmers as cover. The implication? This wasn't a real grassroots movement. Clarkson's response was devastating. He brought actual farmers to TV interviews, not carefully selected spokespeople, real people with dirt under their fingernails telling real stories. Third generation dairy farmer facing £800,000 tax bill. Family that would lose land their ancestors farmed since 1600s. Young farmer who'd never afford to inherit his parents' farm. These weren't millionaire tax dodgers. These were people Starmer claimed to represent. And they were turning against labor. December 2024. The protest didn't stop. Every week, new demonstrations. Tractors blocking roads, farmers occupying government buildings, rural communities mobilizing. And Clarkson, everywhere. TV interviews, newspaper columns, social media, podcasts, every platform amplifying the same message. Starmer is killing British farming. Labor tried fighting back. Ministers gave interviews explaining the policy, defending the numbers, insisting only the wealthy were affected. But they were losing the narrative war. Because while ministers spoke in statistics and percentages, Clarkson spoke in stories people understood. Meet Sarah, fourth generation farmer, works 80-hour weeks, earns less than minimum wage. Her farm is worth £2 million on paper. When her dad dies, she'll owe £200,000 in tax. She doesn't have it. She'll lose the farm. That's not wealth. That's theft. The public sided with Sarah. January 2025, polls started shifting. Labor's rural support collapsed. Areas that voted Labor in July were turning against Starmer. More concerning for number 10, urban voters were sympathizing with farmers. Because Clarkson had reframed the issue. This wasn't about protecting rich landowners. It was about family businesses, inheritance, working class people who happened to own land instead of shops. Starmer's team panicked. This was supposed to be easy. Tax the wealthy, fund public services, popular policy. Instead, political disaster. They tried new tactics. Rachel Reeves announced consultations and refinements. Translation: we're looking for ways to back down without admitting we're backing down. Clarkson wasn't buying it. Consultations mean delay tactics. Refinements mean complicated exemptions that only help the rich. What we need is simple: scrap the tax. February 2025, Starmer made his first major mistake. In an interview, he dismissed Clarkson as a celebrity playing farmer who doesn't understand the complexities of tax policy. The condescension was obvious. Clarkson's response was brutal. I understand this. Family farms are dying. You understand this? You're killing them. The difference? I care. You don't. That exchange defined the conflict. Starmer, careful, technocratic, dismissive of concerns he didn't share. Clarkson, blunt, emotional, speaking for people Starmer couldn't reach. The public's verdict? Clarkson was winning. March 2025, by-elections in rural constituencies. Labor should have held these seats comfortably. They won them just months earlier. Instead, Conservatives and Reform UK surged. Farmers voted against Labor in record numbers, and exit polls showed why. Inheritance tax was the top issue. Starmer's team tried spinning it. Midterm protest votes happens to every government. But they knew the truth. Clarkson had weaponized rural anger into electoral consequences. April 2025, the crisis escalated. Farmers announced a national strike. One day, no food deliveries to supermarkets in London and major cities. Let them see, Clarkson said, what happens when farming stops. Starmer called it irresponsible blackmail. Clarkson called it making you understand what you're destroying. The strike happened. Supermarket shelves emptied. City dwellers faced shortages. Media coverage was split. Some outlets criticized farmers for hurting ordinary people. Others asked why government policy drove farmers to such desperation. But the impact was undeniable. Farming wasn't invisible anymore. And Clarkson? He'd forced the issue onto every front page, every news bulletin, every dinner table conversation. May 2025. Starmer finally agreed to meet with farming representatives. Clarkson wasn't invited. This is for serious agricultural leaders, not celebrities. The message was clear. Starmer would negotiate with anyone except Clarkson. Clarkson's response: he's afraid to face me. because he knows I'll ask questions he can't answer. The meeting happened. Government offered minor concessions, higher thresholds, longer payment terms, complex exemptions. Farming leaders called it inadequate. Clarkson called it an insult. They're offering crumbs while stealing the loaf. The protests continued. June 2025. Something shifted in Westminster. Labor backbenchers started breaking ranks. MPs from rural constituencies facing electoral wipeout. One Labor MP publicly called for policy review. Then another, then 5 more. Starmer's authority was crumbling. And the man causing it wasn't even a politician. He was a TV presenter turned farmer who'd mobilized the community politicians ignored. July 2025. Conservative leadership sensed opportunity. Kemi Badenoch met with Clarkson publicly. Photo op with tractors. Promises to scrap the tax if conservatives return to power. Starmer accused her of cynical opportunism. Clarkson's response, at least she's listening, you're not. The political calculation was obvious. Conservatives were using Clarkson to rebuild rural support, but it was working. August 2025. Labor's polling in rural areas was catastrophic. Areas they'd won in July 2024 were now hostile territory. The inheritance tax had become symbolic, not just about farming, but about Labor's disconnect from communities outside cities. Starmer faced an impossible choice. Back down on the tax. John Reset, look weak, lose revenue, admit mistake, push forward equals lose rural seats, embolden opposition, face ongoing protests. Either way, he'd lost. And the man who'd beaten him wasn't a political genius. He was someone who spoke plainly, understood the issue personally, and refused to shut up. September 2025. Clarkson's TV show returned for a new series. Episode 1 opened with footage of the protests, the strikes, the confrontations with government. Then Clarkson looked at the camera and said, "They thought I'd get bored and quit. They thought farmers would give up. They were wrong. This fight isn't over. It's just beginning." Millions watched. Social media exploded. The pressure on Starmer intensified. October 2025, rumors started circulating. Labor was preparing a major policy U-turn. Not complete reversal, they couldn't admit total defeat, but significant change that would gut the original policy. Clarkson's team heard the whispers, but refused to celebrate prematurely. We'll believe it when we see it in writing. November 2025, 1 year since the protests began. Rachel Reeves stood at the dispatch box announcing refinements to agricultural inheritance tax. The new thresholds were so high that most family farms were exempt. The payment terms so generous that affected farms could manage. The exemptions so broad that the policy was effectively neutered. Labor insisted this was always the plan, listening to concerns and adjusting implementation. Nobody believed them. Everyone knew what happened. They'd been forced to back down. And the man who forced them was sitting on his farm, watching the announcement, allowing himself a rare smile. Clarkson's statement was characteristically blunt. They blinked. We won. British farming survives. The farming community erupted in celebration. But the political damage to Starmer was permanent, because this wasn't just a policy defeat. It was a demonstration that a celebrity farmer with a microphone and a cause could force a prime minister to retreat. December 2025, the aftermath. Starmer's authority was diminished, his rural support destroyed, his image as a strong leader shattered. Labor MPs whispered about leadership challenges. Conservative opposition sensed blood. And Jeremy Clarkson returned to farming, occasionally tweeting about the victory, already planning his next TV series. He hadn't sought political power, didn't want to be an MP, didn't want to lead a party. He just defended something he cared about. And in doing so, he'd achieved what professional politicians couldn't. He'd beaten a prime minister. The question haunting Westminster: what happens next time? Next time government threatens rural communities. Next time politicians dismiss farming. Next time someone decides working, people don't understand policy. Because Clarkson had shown there's a new kind of opposition. Not political parties, but popular figures with platforms who can mobilize people politicians can't reach. Starmer had learned a brutal lesson. Parliament can be controlled, media can be managed, political opponents can be outmaneuvered. But when a celebrity with millions of followers decides to fight you and has legitimate grievances to fight about, you're in trouble. The cameras turn to number 10. Starmer sits at his desk preparing his next statement. But the question lingers. Who really won the battle for Britain's farms? The Prime Minister with all the power? Or the farmer with all the followers? The answer is obvious, and every politician in Westminster knows it.